Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video. You join me here in the rain. We're going to be taking a look at the white i-MiEV here that we got running previously. In the time since I got it running, I've discovered some new issues with it that are pretty significant, which is kind of what I was afraid of. So we're going to kind of discuss what's wrong, take a look at the data, whatever I can pull with a scan tool, and see if we can come up with any solutions to address it, short of taking some more drastic measures. So join me and we'll take a deep dive into this thing and see what's going on. Alright, so we're here sitting in the car with the car on. As you can see, we're at about 50% state of charge there, plus or minus. I've put about 20 miles on this since we put it together. I did charge it once briefly a little bit. But what we've got going on is a bit more of a major issue than what I was originally hoping for. So I'm going to open up, I've got the scan tool connected here. I'm going to go into our battery management unit here. And what we're going to see here is that the cell voltages when the car is sitting here at rest are all pretty even. Actually, better than I would have suspected, although that could be because the car has been sitting for a couple days. And that may have given it a chance to balance a bit. But anyway, here we're connected, so you can see our charge status display shows 53%, charge status control 47.5%, and you can see our battery cell voltages. Our maximum is 3.94, our minimum is 3.885, so we're only off by, what, that'd be about 60 millivolts, so that's still pretty high. Or I guess even less than 60, maybe like 55 millivolts. 55, 60. Anyway, it's pretty significant cell imbalance, but considering the overall condition of the cells that we saw, I'm actually surprised that it's that close. But the issue here is that when we're at lower state of charge like this, and of course all of our ABS lights come on when I'm connected with the scan tool, so you can ignore those. But at lower states of charge, or even at, quasi higher states of charge, even if I'm at like maybe 60 or 70%, if the car's driven for more than a couple miles, basically the internal resistance of the cells kind of starts to catch up with power output. So like at this lowest state of charge, I might get one sort of full pedal, power output. And then subsequently, every additional time I try and pull full power, the power will be limited and the car basically goes into a turtle mode. And it gets worse the longer that you drive. And that's because the voltage sag with the cells is being pulled down when you accelerate. And after you let the car sit for a while, it kind of recovers. But as you're driving it around, it continues to just get worse and worse. And that was kind of my fear with this, as high as the internal resistance on the cells were. So my plan here is I am going to graph all of the cell voltages, which is going to be a lot of data. There's 88 cells in this battery. I'm going to graph all of the cell voltages for all the different cells, and we're going to see which ones are suffering the most. And if we get lucky, maybe not a ton of them are going to be suffering that badly, although I have a suspicion that we're going to have a whole bunch that are in really poor shape. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this set up to graph everything. And I'll try and get the camera set up so that you can actually see the dash and the power meter so that I can demonstrate what exactly it is that I'm talking about. Alright, so I've got the scan tool set up to record some live data for us. It actually will only record a limited number of data points, so I can only do 1/2 of the pack at a time. But that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and start recording. And we're going to go ahead and just go for a short little spin kind of around the block here and demonstrate what exactly is going on here. And again, you can ignore the ABS and traction control lights that are on. That's because the scan tool's connected and it disables those. So the power was kind of ramping in there just a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and get out here on a little bit higher speed road where we can accelerate up to speed, and I'll kind of show you how it'll go into turtle mode and how the power will become limited. And that's kind of the main issue at play here, is that the internal resistance on these cells is so high that there's a lot of voltage sag. And that voltage sag is pulling the cell voltages likely down to, basically the minimum cutoff voltage. And the battery management system is limiting the amount of power in order to keep the cells from going below that minimum voltage. And essentially that's what turtle mode is. So I'll join you when we get out here to the main road and I can show you our power output here. Alright, light here just turned green, so I'm going to give us a full power. So we have full power available right now. But I'm betting that when we come up to the next light up here, we might end up power limited if we go for another full throttle pull. Usually the first pull might get full power, but it continues to get worse the more that it's driven. So we'll find out here momentarily when we pull out from this light here after the traffic clears. All right, we're clear. Gonna do a full pull here. So we got full power. Okay, it's still not limiting us yet. I'm actually surprised that it did 2 full power pulls like that without dropping significantly, so we might have to drive it just a little bit more before it starts to happen. Alright, so we're starting to get into power cut territory here. I'm getting onto sort of this, I don't know, you could call it like a frontage road that goes to the airport. If we go full throttle here, you can see our turtle is showing up on the dash. It wasn't limiting power very much, but it was a little bit. So if we go full throttle again, here you can see our power output is actually decreasing even though my foot is to the floor. I'm off throttle again. And this will just continue to get worse, as I continue to drive the car. If I park it, let it sit for a little while, it'll kind of recover, the cell voltages will jump back up. Just like what happened when we did the cell testing, the capacity testing on the cells, they would discharge all the way down to their cutoff voltage, and then after sitting for a few hours, the voltage would creep back up, and then you could pull more capacity out of them again. That's basically the same thing that's happening here, except to a little bit more of an extreme case, since we're pulling more power out of the cells. The voltage is dropping even more significantly. But we'll see how much our power cut goes when we come back here the other way. Alright, so we're going to go for another full throttle pull. So we're foot to the floor, still accelerating, but our power output is decreasing. And there, I just let off the throttle again. We slow down a little bit and then do another full throttle. You can see we're even more limited here. And our power output is still continuing to decrease as we accelerate. Again, full throttle, power decreasing. We're pretty much not even hardly accelerating at this point. But essentially, that's the problem that we've got. And now that basically what we've got to do is try and figure out how many cells are affected by this issue. If it's half the pack, if it's the majority of the pack, if it's only, you know, a handful of cells, but one of these issues is going to be, you know, affecting the pack, and it's just a matter of figuring out which ones it is. All right, so I've gone ahead and done some data analysis on the recordings that I did. I decided to just put it all together in a spreadsheet and print it out, since it's going to be much easier to show on camera that way rather than having to scroll through the scan tool. Like I mentioned, it won't record all of the data points for all of the cell voltages at once. So I had to do it in two separate runs. So I did the first half of the pack, that's CMU ID1 through CMU ID6. And then I did the second half of the pack separately, so that's CMU ID7 through CMU ID12. And basically what I did was I just did a couple of full throttle runs for a few seconds, basically from a stop, just basically getting up to the speed limit, basically. And then what I did, bump the camera there, what I did was I took the last frame under that full throttle load and then recorded all the voltages from that. So you can actually see the amperage that the car was pulling under load during that last frame. And of course the cell voltages are getting drawn lower and lower as you're continuing to accelerate under full throttle like this. These two runs were not super long full throttle runs. You know, these weren't like getting up to 45 or 50 or 60 miles an hour. These were from like 0 to 35 miles an hour maybe. So maybe not completely representative, but it should give a pretty good idea of which cells here are underperforming the most. This cell that I have circled here, so CMU ID3 cell A, that's the 17th cell in the pack, and that's actually the one that we swapped out in the last video with the purple casing cell. And you can see that one was at about 3.1 volts. It's pretty close in the neighborhood of all the rest of the other unhighlighted ones, maybe a little bit on the lower end, which actually surprises me a little bit. But the worst offenders here are going to be all the cells that I have highlighted in orange. So these are all the cells that are under 3 volts under that full load acceleration. The two worst ones are actually these two right here. So this one was at 2.795. This one was at 2.86. Low voltage cutoff for this pack is 2.75 volts per cell. So this one in particular is pretty close to that. This one's not far off. I mean, that's only, you know, 100 millivolts away, even less than that. And then all the rest of these orange ones, you know, were also below 3 volts. You know, regardless of how close they were to the actual low voltage cutoff. Anything under 3 volts I would consider to be, if not a problem now, certainly a problem in the near future. And then I also went ahead and highlighted some more. So all of these ones in yellow are all the cells that were under 3.1 volts. The car should still operate normally without going into turtle mode on these ones, but maybe under a more extended full throttle run, or, you know, given a little bit more time, degradation, what have you, these ones could potentially become a problem in the future as well. But basically it looks like we've got 8 of these, you know, really bad ones. And then what, that's half a dozen, 8, 9, 10, 11. So another dozen of these ones that are not as good as the rest, but probably still quasi-serviceable. So anyway, now it's just down to trying to figure out what the best way to move forward on this is, if we want to try and replace these cells with some additional ones. The guy that I got that replacement cell from, I can get some more from him. But, you know, it's a little bit of a matter of time and effort and all that. And those cells were not the most perfect match for this pack, as we saw in the last video. I kind of had to pick the worst one out of all those that was the closest match, but it actually did still have a bit more capacity than everything else. Although given that this one is falling pretty well in line under load, maybe that's going to be close enough for this car. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at here. I did also just turn this into a bar graph that kind of represents a little bit more, so you can kind of see just how much of a difference there is as far as the cell voltages. This one right here is at our really low end. So that's our 2.795. That's that one right there. And anyway, that's basically our worst performing cells are this one here, this one, that one. These two were also pretty poor. And then we've got another one over there and this one over here. So yeah, those are all the orange cells essentially on this graph. And it kind of puts into perspective when you look at it compared to everything else, just how much lower these are compared to, kind of the baseline, I would say, is around, maybe this 3.1 volt mark is roughly the baseline for these under load, apart from these really low ones. So anyway, yeah, it's now just down to trying to figure out if we want to try and source some more cells to get this in a little bit better, more drivable condition, or if we might look into other alternatives. Alrighty folks, that's going to be a wrap on this one. Pretty short update here on the additional problems we have with the i-MiEV. Obviously there's definitely some cells that are going to need to be addressed in order to make this car truly roadworthy again. It is definitely drivable in its current condition, as long as you're not too hard on the throttle, but clearly it has issues. As far as moving forward with it, there's multiple different options. We can try to replace the 8 cells that we know are seriously underperforming, and that'll probably buy, some amount more lifespan out of the pack on this car. But there's caveats to that. We know that there's a bunch of other cells that were also slightly underperforming, though not quite as severely. Over time, those are going to, continue to slip and become worse, and eventually we'll be in basically the same kind of situation. How much longer will the car last if we replace the 8 worst offenders here? 6 months, a year, a couple years? It's kind of hard to predict. So I'm going to be exploring some options in terms of what exactly we want to do to try and get this car properly roadworthy again, whether we want to try and replace just those 8 cells or try and replace all of the underperforming ones, which I think is probably a less likely option. Or maybe we can see if we can source another, just a overall better condition original pack to just swap into this. Or I suppose the biggest expense as far as an option would be to do a battery upgrade, which maybe is a possibility that we can look into. There, like I mentioned before, there's plenty of folks that have done that kind of thing on these, and it would be a pretty cool upgrade to explore. But anyways, that's going to do it for this one. So stay tuned for future updates on this i-MiEV, potentially. For sure, we're going to be working on the black one here soon, at least as soon as the cells come in for it. And of course, there's plenty of other EV repair projects to see here on out of Spec Renew. So as always, thanks for watching.